Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals. Today, we're going to be talking about the pinnacle of high-performance piston rifles ready for rollout in the global war on terror from the one and only Bill Ruger? The Ruger SR-556. But before we get into that, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe as it helps immensely. Also, go ahead and comment your favorite discontinued rifle that is in need of a resurrection. Cries and sad ACR noises. The Ruger SR-556 was developed in the late aughts before being brought to market in 2009. That places it as a contemporary alongside a few other piston rifle designs that came to market around that time frame. The modern piston-driven AR-like rifle started in 2004 with the HK416, which has since been the most successful of all of the models we're about to talk about. Still seeing a wide service today with multiple variants, civilian versions, and a boatload of HK fanboys swooning over their favorite overpriced garbage rod. After that, the aforementioned Magpul Masada began testing in 2006 but didn't enter the market until 2010, renamed the Bushmaster ACR, and was brutally mismanaged after that. And no, I'm not going to talk about the Remington Defense ACR, as that is another sad loss to the world that never made it to production. The first Belgian battle rifles, the FN Scars, were fielded in 2009, the SR-556, a mostly improved HK416 the following year in 2010, and alongside them the lowly Ruger SR-556. Now, the name Ruger and modern piston rifles don't necessarily go hand in hand. You might think of the 1022, M77, or even the Mini 14, but not a HK416 competitor. Most people either don't know or have forgotten about the SR-556. Dialing back the clock, in that time frame there were rumors of phasing out the M4s for the Scars. Certain units had already adopted the HK416 and similar variants. The piston craze, so to speak, was in full swing for a number of years until everyone figured out that it was all hype and nonsense. A decade and a half later, and that conversation has started to circle back, so who's ready for round 2 with a new batch of rifles? Well, that's probably for a video at some point in the future. Getting back to the Ruger SR-556, let's move through the basics. At the heart of the rifle, we have a 5.56 chambered, 16-inch cold hammer forged, chrome-lined 4145 chrome moly vanadium barrel with a somewhat unfortunate 1-in-9 twist at the time. Also of note is my example is cut down to 14.5 inches and pin and welded with a Reardon Plan B mount back to the legal limit of 16 inches. Up front would have been a flash hider similar to what you would find on a Mini 14. Inside the forged upper receiver, we have a complete chrome-plated one-piece carrier with a machined strike face for the piston. Now, Ruger being Ruger, the carrier is not full auto cut, so it was not compatible with my maximum semi-auto devices. Very lame. Now, that strike face that is machined into the body is very important. Unlike traditional direct impingement AR-15s where the gas is fed back into the system via a gas tube that then works the internal piston on the BCG, with a short-stroke piston rifle, the gas is fed into a regulator which directs the gas into an op rod that strikes the carrier to begin the cycle of operation. Having that strike face directly machined into the carrier, meaning it's one piece, is the correct way to get that done. Now, speaking of the gas regulator, the SR-556 is one of the most modern piston rifles of its time without a doubt, at least conceptually. Rather than accelerate the carrier to Mach 5 like the methed out engineers at HK, the SR-556 has a 4-position gas block, 3 regular settings, and an off setting that will not cycle the system.
Okay, so that actually is 0 gas.
That last one is kind of worthless, so really just 3 settings, which would usually be the correct amount. You should have a regular setting where the rifle will run just about everything, a suppressed setting for use with a high back pressure can, and an overgas setting where you can cut through mud, debris, or below 0 temperatures where my testing took place. While conceptually that's great and a feature all piston rifles should come with, the settings are just set up incorrectly. On the lowest setting, no suppressor, standard M193 ball ammunition and an H3 buffer in the back, and below freezing temperatures outside, it's right about where it should be. But, being that it's already on the lowest setting, when you do add a suppressor to the mix, it accelerates the carrier to an extreme degree. This can lead to advanced wear and broken parts. In reality, the lowest setting should be the middle setting with an additional reduced setting below it for use with suppressors. Being one of the touted benefits of having a piston operating system is that it doesn't dump extra gas into the system via the gas tube. You still get extra gas coming back down the bore, but at least it removes one of the additional vectors for the gases to assault the operator's senses. As it stands right now, the top two settings are all but completely useless. Now, without a suppressor and on the lowest setting, I think it shot great. Very soft recoil impulse, and I'm sure in part due to the tuning of the system, and also in part due to the weight. That's called foreshadowing. Another defining feature of the SR-556 is the rail system and the way everything connects together. The rail itself is a fashionable for the time and very functional quad rail, meaning you have more than enough real estate for all of the performance modifiers you could hope for. Now up front, the gas block is pressed and pinned to the barrel, and then it is pinned to the handguard. Moving to the back of the handguard, it clamps to the barrel nut, which is not a particularly impressive way to mount it, but then it's also pinned to the upper receiver. So everything is pinned and clamped into position nicely, which should make for a rock-solid attachment and a very rigid rail. Two small problems though. Number one is that the system is no longer free-floated, meaning that any force imparted to the handguard would now also in some way affect the barrel and affect accuracy as a whole and point of impact shift. Now the SR-556 is more than combat accurate, if you will, but just something to note. The other problem is that if you've been paying attention to all that steel and aluminum used in constructing the SR-556, is that the base weight comes in at just a hair under 8 pounds. Which on its own isn't terrible. Plenty of rifles have a base weight higher than that, but when you consider its competition, a standard AR-15 has a weight around 1.5 pounds lighter than that. Still, most piston enjoyers would happily overlook the weight penalty to get what in their minds is the most reliable operating system they can buy with some modern features for the time. However, what they won't overlook, and in my opinion what killed the SR-556 more than anything, was the price. $2,000 in 2010 money is what a new SR-556 would cost you. Keep in mind that was nearly double or more what a comparable AR would cost you. Even for piston rifles, it was not cheap. And when you could get truly futuristic rifles like the ACR, however badly that ended up, or rifles with real military service like the HK416, SIG-516, or the FN SCARs, the Ruger SR-556 was up against the giants of its time. And as you can imagine, the sales were not ideal. In 2016, Ruger discontinued all SR-556 rifles except for the maligned SR-556 Takedown, which was discontinued a few years later. In the time that they were producing the rifle, they attempted to revamp the model slightly. They introduced the SR-556 Carbine in 2010, and later a 6.8 special version, and then a somewhat last-ditch attempt with the SR-556E, where they stripped down features and performance and went with a lighter handguard to try and confront the rifle's biggest issues: price and weight. Ultimately, it failed as it was far too little, far too late. So now the SR-556 is relegated to a neat little piece of history that you can find on the secondhand market for well underneath its original MSRP. If only the same could be said about the ACR. But with all that out of the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the Ruger SR-556 or whatever your favorite forgotten combat rifle of the early 2010s is. And once again, with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.